I'd like to welcome the audience and welcome you today. And we're going to be talking with Tami Zawistowski, representative from the 61st District, House District. Tami's just gotten off a campaign back in April. Now she's in another campaign. First of all, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and let the voters know who you are and what you think? And
oh, absolutely. Yes, I currently serve as 61st District Representative, which is East Granby, Suffield, and a portion of Windsor. I was elected in April in a special election, and as Richard mentioned, I'm running again in November. Fun never ends, never stops. Anyway, I live in East Granby. I am a small business owner. I've had my own business for the past 18 years. Before that, I was Executive Vice President of Northeast Savings in Hartford, and I spent a year as Assistant Director of the Yukon Real Estate Center. Mm-hmm. So I've had a bit of a varied background, and I think that serves me very well in what I'm doing now with the legislature. Mm-hmm. Also, I serve on the Board of Finance in East Granby, Economic Development Commission. I'm on the NFIB, which is the National Federation of Independent Business Connecticut Leadership mm-hmm. Council, past president of the East Granby Chamber, board member of the Bradley Regional Chamber, member of the Suffield Chamber, and a member of Suffield Rotary. So,
you're a busy lady.
Yes, very much so.
So how do you have time to fit all this in?
Well, my business has suffered for the time being,
but
it'll get back up to normal. It's luckily my business has very flexible hours, so if I get home at 10 o'clock at night, I can go out and work.
Yeah, oh, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. And you mentioned the special election.
Yes.
You really didn't have much time to fit in a groove. Last year was the short session,
yes.
and it was over May 5th or so, mm-hmm. and you were in April. So how did you fit into the groove, or were you able to get into it?
Well, it's interesting because I was sworn in on April 16th, and I was voting within a half an hour. The entire 3-month session in 2014, there were 304 votes taken. I was there to vote for 264 of them.
No kidding.
Yeah, it's good though because you can get a lot of information. You can talk both sides of the aisle and get some real sense of the history of the bills. You can go online and read the testimony. You can talk to committee chairs and ranking members. Everybody's very, very helpful. Yeah. But it was very frantic for a while.
I can imagine. I can imagine. Even when you have the full term, it is frantic. Mm-hmm. Just so folks know, most of the votes for the full General Assembly take place in the last 6 weeks or so. Mm-hmm. The committee meetings and committee hearings do all of the work, the pre-work up until that time. But so you were able to look at those bills, mm-hmm. and we're able to come up with reasonable, intelligently thought out votes.
And not only that, I mean, you can contact people outside the General Assembly as well. There were a couple of instances where I've spoken to the chief of an ambulance association, mm-hmm.
And
also one of the superintendents in the district to get a better sense of how bills impacted the district directly.
Right.
And there's always that option. You can, since the votes take a while, you have the option of going out and making some quick contacts, whether it's by email or phone.
Yeah. Well, everybody hears about special interest groups. Those are special interest groups. Mm-hmm. They pay attention to the bills that are going to affect negatively or positively, and a legislator is smart, I think, to use those kind of resources, as long as you take everything they say with a grain of salt, because they're looking at it from their own perspective.
I think one of the things that surprised me most is outside the chambers is all the legislators. There's that space where they can't come in, but all the lobbyists that are standing outside. The minute you go outside of this area,
you go to the ladies' room, you're in trouble.
Oh, absolutely. It was interesting. I met some really good people.
They are. With the years that I was there, I met many good people who had many good ideas. Always trying to remember that these folks are looking at from their particular interest point of view.
Yes.
And that's the only thing I would caution as a new legislator, is to make sure you ask the other side what they think about it too.
Well,
And,
sometimes you get hit up by lobbyists for both sides
Both
of the
sides.
same trip.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
it's interesting.
Absolutely.
You
It is.
definitely get a couple of different perspectives.
Absolutely, and you can get a lot of information from them
Yes.
because obviously, I knew from my own perspective I was not an expert in a lot of things, and I needed to have the advice of some folks or information from some folks from both sides of every issue. What committees did they put you on?
Okay, I'm on appropriations, which actually has been meeting during the summer as well. That's been a fairly busy committee. Transportation, which is appropriate with the airport here.
This is a great,
and
great
also
committee.
Commerce.
Commerce as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that's a particular interest of yours.
Yeah.
So just to get back to the local side things for just a second, you had some comments you made about Newgate Prison and that they're going to start some work, and that's going to be work on the infrastructure, the
I couldn't
walls and buildings and
I couldn't
bricks.
let this go. Let this opportunity go without mentioning
Yeah.
something about it, because we've seen it there empty way too long. What they're doing is, the project is the guardhouse, which is the one that kind of sits out on Newgate Road,
Right.
is basically sliding down the hill diagonally. And what the problem is they need to they've got a way to do this without hurting it as an archaeological site. They're putting in what are called needle beams. They're going to be basically drilling through portions of the guardhouse to stabilize it, and then putting in micro pilings to fasten it down to the bedrock so it doesn't slide anymore.
Okay.
But it's a very touchy project. As a matter of fact, I can't resist this either. This is the project manual.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
is it's not anything that you can just have some normal contractor do. They only had, I think, 2 bids.
Right.
Contract's been signed, insurance is taken care of. What they're doing right now is the contractor has come back with 3 different proposals for some changes that they felt were necessary to the engineering. They're hoping to get that straightened out in the next couple of weeks. They're still looking at, we're not looking at a soft opening for fall by any means at this point.
Right.
They were optimistic about it before, but I think we're looking at work starting this fall, if all goes well.
Okay.
And just keep your fingers crossed that the ground doesn't freeze too early this year.
Because we did have some bonding in place for them to do that back when I was in office.
Yeah.
And but it takes such a long time for this
Yeah.
process. But again, you mentioned that you just can't get any contractor. You have to have a contractor specializing in restoration.
Yeah, we had to
work.
wait for him to finish another job to actually come in and do new drawings. So
Okay,
it's
because I've been a little anxious about that over the years.
well, it's been since the end of 2009. It's been closed.
Yes,
So
absolutely. And
yeah.
I just after I had gotten out of office, and I've driven by it many, many times, and can't tell you how annoyed I became watching that just sit there.
Oh yeah, it drives me crazy. That's one of the things I really wanted to work on once I got into office, just to make sure, even if I couldn't do anything about getting it done, at least have local people know what's going on.
Right.
You know, I can't go out and push it. I can hold them accountable to make sure that we know what's going on.
Right.
But that's at least if we can do that, at least we can at least it answers a lot of questions.
Right.
It's an important asset for our area.
It is, and it's a National Historic Site, and it should be taken care of properly by the state. And now that I'm not no longer with the state, I can criticize them for it. But, let's get to a little bit more meat.
Sure.
We have had the discussion about unfunded mandates for years. When I came in 1991, we were talking about it then. It's still a problem, still an issue. Do you see some hope for the future?
It all depends on what happens with the elections this fall, I think. Sitting on appropriations, I do get to see what all the fiscal impact before it actually gets to the assembly floor. And there are a lot of people on both sides of the aisle that actually at this point are very sensitive to the unfunded mandates issue. It's not just Republicans. A lot of the Democrats, the more conservative Democrats, are very concerned about it as well, because what's happening is these costs are coming back to their own districts and increasing the property taxes. Because the state's requiring these towns to do things and not paying for them. Right. I mean, especially on the education side, but there's plenty also as well on the municipal side. I think one of the more recent examples would be Common Core and the testing that's involved. Those are mandates that were by the state. That there's been no additional funding for that. I think there has been some funding for the computers for the testing, but it doesn't cover everything.
Also, sometimes they fund it for a year.
Yes.
And then they drawback, and then they leave it to the municipality to figure
Yeah.
out how to do with it.
Well, there's one coming up now that got approved in the last session having to do with preschool education. And what it's going to do is the state will fund it. It's called Smart Start. They are going to fund it for 10 years. Some of it's going to come out of the tobacco settlement. Some of it, there's a lot of money being shifted around, whether it's for good or not. But I mean, preschool education's a good thing, but to fund it for 10 years and then let the towns have to pick up on it, I mean, I doubt that the state would continue the funding on it. It just, so and this is the habit. I mean, they may fund it for a period of a few years, and then hey, it's yours.
Yeah, I know when we were we tried to get a number of amendments passed on certain bills about doing fiscal responsibility, defining what the fiscal responsibilities are towards some of the towns, and some of the towns when these mandates come in. Any of that stuff going on now? Any discussion continue?
There is some discussion, but there's nothing that substantial at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, what I'd really like to see is a moratorium on new unfunded mandates, and I would love to see a requirement that 3/4 of both houses in the General Assembly a positive vote in order to have any new unfunded mandates. Not just a simple majority, but 2/3 or 3/4, something meaningful, so that you actually have to have the consent of both sides of the aisle to be able to get any of these unfunded mandates in.
Right.
I'd love to see a moratorium first, and maybe a sunset provision.
Yeah.
That's.
Sunsets are difficult
Yeah,
because
I know they are.
They're easy to change. They're
Yes.
easy to say, well, we'll put it off one
I
more
know.
year. In fact, if I had time to think about it, I could probably come up with a few that they've done that on.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make good sense to do that. I mean, if you're going to sunset them, you're promising your constituents that it's going to go away at that time.
Yeah.
Now, I know when I was in office, I had constituents who would tell me about the temporary income tax.
Yeah.
And
of course, we all
I have
believe
to
that.
I had to tell them, I said, there is no possible way that we're going to get rid of the income tax that I could see.
Yeah.
Now, if you guys can do that, that's wonderful.
Oh, yeah.
But when we were there, there's just no possible way, because when the House is broken up in 100 Democrats and 50 Republicans, the numbers are there, and the numbers weren't there for that. You did mention a little bit of something about Common Core, and I think there's a lot of confusion about it. What have you been hearing from constituents in Suffield and East Granby and Windsor?
I think there's a lot of people that are unhappy about it, and a lot of it has to do with the testing. The problems that I've heard have been mostly on the math side. Some people are happy with the writing side, but what it really does, it takes away a lot of authority from the local boards of education, and I do take some issue with that. Standards, fine. It's good to have some type of standards, but especially if you have underperforming school districts. But if you have a school district that's doing well, I mean, this is just another unfunded mandate that it's a burden, and it keeps the teachers and administrators away from what they should be doing. And plus, the way it was put in, the implementation was there were no public hearings. There was insufficient any input from parents, from teachers, from administrators, from the general public. They had no hearings before they were implemented. Now, the Republicans this past, at the early part of the session before I was there, actually forced a public hearing, and the only way they were able to get that through is through there was a maneuver, a ballot maneuver they were able to do in one of the committees, which forced a public. It was a procedural. It was a procedural issue. So they were able to force it, and they had a ton of people come in and speak. Of course, they didn't do anything about anything but he said.
Yeah.
And the literature part of it, I personally have some issue with it, because I'm a book person. I mean, that's what I do for a living.
Yeah.
But what they do is, for example, like Tom Sawyer or The Great Gatsby. They will have the students read a chapter or a section versus the whole book. and expect to understand it. You don't have the context. I think you really lose a lot that way.
Right.
And I really think that I really think if they had the more input, it would have been a better thing. But I still take issues with the lack of authority that the boards have now. And the testing is very burdensome. It's done on computer, and the districts had to pick up a fair amount of expense on that. And it's just, the students it's a tough thing for the students to be able to make that transition from the type of instruction that they had before into a Common Core assessment, the smarter balance testing.
Yeah.
It's something that's foreign, and a lot of students are having some difficulties with it.
And you're saying that they only have to read a chapter or two?
A section. I don't know whether it's a chapter or two. I don't have that information. But yeah, they don't have to read the whole.
Well, how can you get the context? It's like reading Homer or the Iliad or the Odyssey or something like that, and read the first chapter and then take a test on it. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, the whole piece is a masterpiece. It's not a. Yeah. So, okay, that's that, and I'm pretty sure there's going to be continued discussion about that.
I'm sure there will be.
I think there's a lot of mistrust, and frankly, right now the government is doing a lot of things that caused a lot of mistrust, particularly by not having a public hearing. I know public hearings can be noisy and a lot of different opinions, but they help. And they help people understand. They help the legislators understand what the people are thinking. Did you know that Connecticut is, I don't know if it's one of the few states, but it's not every state has a public hearing process.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah. Some states, the legislators do the laws, and that's it. There's no public input.
No, that's a shame.
And it is a shame. And it's one of the, like a stone, one of the stones in the foundation of our government is to let people talk about it. If nothing else, to vent.
Oh, yes.
To be able to get the interest out there and get their discussion, their thoughts out there. And I can't tell you how many times I sat through a committee hearing and you listen to people. I know that it's a repetitive thing in a lot of cases, but then all of a sudden somebody comes in and says a new idea. All of a sudden you sit there and say, what? And say, wait a minute, I didn't think of that way.
Yeah.
And so, because we obviously are not just all-encompassing on the ideas that are out there, and people have a lot of good ideas.
Absolutely. It's a really important part of our process.
Absolutely.
And I think on the Common Core, I think the main thing was the parents and teachers just not having the input. I don't think it would have been the same as if
they right.
Yeah.
Somebody had an idea, said, this is a great idea, we're going to do it this way, and we don't have to listen to anybody else. I'm the expert.
Yeah.
And too often we hear that out of government. Another issue, and I read in some of your brochures, is what can we do about becoming more business-friendly in Connecticut? We're pretty obviously not conducive to creating a small business, at least, to get them started and to help them go. What do you think?
Well, I don't, there's a lot of negatives to Connecticut right now, and I don't want to dwell on that. Everybody reads the paper. There's a lot of really good positives, and we've got such a wonderful history of invention and manufacturing, and it'd be great to get that back. What we need to do is stop scaring off the businesses. For one thing, we have legislation that may or may, sometimes just proposing some legislation scares businesses.
Absolutely.
The most recent one I heard about is family leave. Paid family leave is being considered. Family leave is important. I mean, if you have somebody that you're caring for, it's important, but it really should be left up to the employer and the employee, because you don't know, the person may have been there for a month or whatever.
Right.
What they're talking about is a potential mandate of 6 weeks of paid family leave at 66% of pay.
Oh, boy.
Which is a huge burden.
Yeah.
Now, suppose it doesn't go through. That still is out there as a proposal.
Absolutely.
And businesses are very, very aware of this kind of thing.
They know that stuff.
Yeah. And then I've got an example of somebody that I helped out in one of our towns. He was fined, as a business owner, long-term business owner, was fined for something that he didn't do. I can't get into a whole lot of details. But the appeals process, I mean, it was bad enough that that he got fined for something that he didn't do. The worst part is he got a letter from that department saying, if you want to file appeal, you have to call us between 10 and 12 on a Wednesday. I'm serious. I am not making this up. So we were able to help them out.
Yeah.
But that's just you get examples like that all the time. I mean, you've been in the position of being. You hear these stories. And just like Department of Social Services, great. They've reduced their hold time now from 78 minutes to 66 minutes.
Right.
You know, it's just nuts. But yeah, I mean, but as far as the small businesses, I mean, any of the businesses, you know, we need to make sure our people are trained well. I mean, the programs with the community colleges are super in order to get more manufacturing and technology trained people.
Yeah.
The workforce is aging in that area, and I did vote for the expansion of those programs. It is non-tech and the other community colleges.
Yeah.
Plus, returning veterans, they have skills that they've gotten in the armed forces. We passed a bill, I co-sponsored it, to be able to have them apply that knowledge that they gained to potential professional certifications and licensing, so they don't have to go through all the schooling again.
Right.
Other things, basically do some tax relief. Create some incentives. I'm not talking about corporate giveaways to hedge funds or anything, but some help for businesses who want to hire people, who want to have capital improvements, who want to do research.
Research development.
Yes, I mean, you have to really. I have a very short background in loan underwriting, and you have to be able to see the value that you're getting.
Right.
Not just give them the money.
Yeah.
We don't need any more burrito companies going broke. So.
Have you worked with, well, maybe you haven't yet, but Connecticut Innovations?
I don't work directly with them.
They're a pseudo-government group, which the legislature provided them a bunch of money many years ago.
They're out of money.
They're out of money?
Actually, I read this like last week. They have no money left until next year.
Oh, no
apparently.
kidding.
Yeah.
And I always found them to be very resourceful, very useful, very cooperative with government, with the legislative side anyway. And thought they picked and they were able to get money to developing businesses, and some of them were developed and needed to develop more, and do it in a way where they could, maintain the money that they had and still help businesses and not burden the taxpayer with that.
Well, I love the idea. I mean, the private-public partnership is great, and I mean, there's some exciting stuff going on out there. I mean, you can't hear it for the noise for the bad things that are going on, but there are companies that are doing well.
Yes.
There need to be more of them.
There need to be more of them, and certainly at the federal level, that's a whole other thing. Yeah.
The other thing that is scaring away businesses too is looking at the state's balance sheet. Nobody wants to relocate in Connecticut or expand in Connecticut if they think that with the state's budget out of balance, they're going to get hit with some additional taxes not too far down the road.
Right.
A lot of them are very afraid of this upcoming budget deficit, thinking they're going to be stuck with additional taxes.
Right.
So all these things do contribute to scaring businesses away or keeping them from expanding locally.
Yes, and that's a fear that we always had was you don't create any new business, but even the businesses that are here will expand somewhere else. Pratt Whitney, Florida, North Carolina, or some of the other ones. They take. Okay, we're going to stay, but we're not going to invest any more money here. We're going to invest it somewhere else. And then that means the kids in college and the kids in school and the technical schools don't have a place to go to work.
Yeah.
And we do that to ourselves. And I know our intentions are good. We're trying to help everybody. But we do so at our own peril. Before we finished, I just want to talk a little bit about the ECS formula and special ed. This is the kind of stuff that makes people go crazy.
It's a crazy formula. It really needs to be fixed. I mean, I don't think anybody would disagree with that. It needs to be fixed. There is a floor funding, and it's so arcane figuring out how it's based on wealth of the town and need, and also number of subsidized lunches, and it's a formula that's a lot more complicated than it probably needs to be.
Right. And I can remember we would always wait for the runs So you could look at the runs, how much my town going to get,
yeah.
how much this town going to get, where's it going to get in bus things and that kind of stuff. And, it was a big list about that thick, 169 towns broken out, and you could go around and tell which school is going to get which. And then that's when it became political.
Yeah.
Because if you had somebody in power and somebody with the education committee, say chairman or whatever, not to say that he or she would do that, but their town seemed to do better than other towns.
Yeah.
You know, and that's it became really terrible. It's a really terrible way to do business because you shortchanges sometimes because they're rich and purportedly rich. As opposed to other towns who are poor and that kind of stuff.
Well, I don't think ECS is much of a problem as special ed, especially in a small school district like East Granby, where one person can throw a lot of the whole budget off.
Now people might not realize that special ed cost might mean one family moves into town with a very special ed need child. Your town has to pay for it.
Yes.
Whatever it is,
whether it's in district or if you have to tuition them out to another public school or another private school, it can be
even if it's
expensive.
not in the budget. You don't have a choice.
Yeah,
up to a certain amount or something.
Yeah.
And then,
well, what it is there's a cost sharing. The formula for special ed does not kick in from the state unless you're 4.5 times your average student cost, which is huge, and there's no cap on it. So if it's the state will only share a certain amount after that. We were trying to, in the last legislative session, get the state to pay more and also to cap it. What the bill included, and it didn't, it was pulled, it was amended before into something entirely different before it got to a vote. Because it didn't have a cap, we weren't willing to let that go through. We wanted to have a good bill to begin with while we have a chance, because it can get to be a huge number.
It's a huge number.
Especially in a size district the size of East Granby.
Smaller community, East Granby or something like that. It's a huge number. So that's certainly something you can work on.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure it'll come back up. I'm not on education committee, but I've made friends there, and believe me, it will come back up next year.
Oh, sure, it absolutely will. I can tell you, it's up every year, and it's very frustrating that you can't do something about it. And I know we can't, because the Connecticut General Assembly, I think 151 people, is pretty representative of the state of Connecticut. When you stand down in the well and you look around at all those people there, you say, gee, there's all kinds of folks in there. People with skills, lawyers, people with teachers, nurses, lots of people who could work things out if they sat down and got rid of the political needs.
One of the things that struck me is I think almost everybody that goes there with the best of intentions. It's just that the approaches are very, very different.
Yes. Absolutely. Their life experience is different. Another thing I think you wanted to chat on is the long-term debt that we've developed in the state of Connecticut for.
Yeah, well, it's a startling number, because every child born in the state of Connecticut's automatically indebted for $30,000. Approximately. And this is something that the children and grandchildren are going to inherit. What it's going to be a drag on our state finances for years to come, where we aren't going to be able to fund things like education or health care or any other vital programs that we have. It's just going to make it very difficult for the state to be able it'll strangle the state, basically, in the long term. And it includes pensions, and it also includes borrowing for bonding, also for borrowing that they've done under this administration to cover operating expenses, which is really scary.
We've talked about that for years, and even the Democratic governors would generally want to stay away from that.
Well, this one did,
because before Mr. Malloy, Governor Malloy, but it's a very difficult issue to deal with. I don't know why you took this on. Because you got plenty of work to do.
Absolutely. I mean,
and why did you do that?
Actually, the story is, doing what I do for a living, I visit a lot of people that are selling stuff, mainly books. And I got tired of hearing of people whose kids had already left the States because they couldn't find jobs here. I got tired of people retiring to Florida after they worked here all their lives because they don't have any income taxes down there.
Right.
And also, what's really sad is people selling their stuff because they need the money.
Right.
This is really what kind of got me moving into public life a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I really like helping people. I mean, I really enjoy it. Probably the best part has been so far since in this term has been getting contact from constituents. And there's some unusual questions and unusual problems that you could never possibly even make up. And I get a lot of satisfaction out of that.
Yeah.
And it's been good.
Well, being in a Republican minority temporarily, of course, one of the biggest satisfactions I did have was being able to help a constituent out of an issue or something like that. And even sometimes when you weren't able to help because of some law, regulation, whatever, people are just so glad to have somebody who's willing to listen to them and try to help them out. So I think it's a worthy endeavor on your part, and I wish you best of luck.
Thank you.
And next, was it November
4th?
4th.
I hope to have our audience voting for me on November 4th, and
vote
you too,
early,
Richard.
vote often.
Yes, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time doing this.
It's always a joy, and I'm glad you're there.
Well, thank you.
I feel very confident.
Thank you.
Thank you.